So now that I have my collars assembled and understitched, and also this is a concave or outward curve, so I had to wedge the seam allowance on the curve so that the seam allowance is nice and flat. Otherwise you will feel some pleating under the edge, and I did that on both sides. Okay, so remember to trim the seam allowance and or trim triangles of the seam allowance on the outward curve so that it stays nice and flat. And I have two mirror image pre-assembled collars, and I will proceed to attaching them to the bodice part. To be able to attach a collar to a bodice, you need a full neckline, and to have a full neckline you need to stitch the shoulders together so that you have a full neckline seam. What I'm going to do is I am going to notch, okay, and you have the back bodice piece. It's cut two in muslin or a garment fabric, and then the front is cut one on fold. Okay, so I will create notch to indicate seam allowance on both sides. Okay, and I'll do the same thing over here. Okay, and also I'll do the same thing for the shoulder. So I have, and I'll do a notch on both sides of the shoulder. And also you have this notch that indicates that this is the center back. So I'll notch the center back, and also I need a notch over here. So I'll notch the neckline and the shoulder line. And I'll do the same thing for the front. So I have the neckline and also the shoulder line. And for the center front, you can also notch the center front a tiny notch just to be able to assemble the neckline on the collar on the neckline. So I have my front, and okay, so I'll open my front piece, and this is the right side. Okay, and I'll open the back piece and I'll assemble them where right side is on top of right side. So in this case, the right side of the back to the right side of the front. Okay, and I'll proceed to pinning the shoulders and sewing them together. I'll do that for both sides, and I'll stitch them in one row. It's a number 2 stitch, back stitch beginning and end. Use the seam guide to stay at the end from the beginning to the end of the seam. And once you get to the neckline, you will just back stitch it. Okay, and then I'll start the other side. Also, until you get to the end of the seam, matching your edges together and using the seam guide. And once you get to the end, back stitch, and this is done. Alright, so now is the time to serge the seam allowance. So I'll press the seam allowance open and serge the shoulder seam, and then I'll come back to attach the collar. Now that I pressed the seam open and I also finished the shoulder seam, serging it, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stay stitch the neckline, and stay stitching is stitching about a little less than half an inch around the neckline, so I can clip it and adjust it to the size of the collar. Okay, so stay stitching is stitch number 1 or 1.5. Okay, and again it is to reinforce this curved seam so that I can clip to it and attach the collar. It prevents the collar, the neckline from stretching, and at the same time it does reinforce that seam so that I can clip to it. So I'll just use the seam guide, and I'll be like a little before, like a 1/16 before the half-inch mark, and I am doing it from the inside of the garment so that I can keep my seams open while I'm stitching. As you can see, my seam allowance kind of went up, so I stopped and I put it back under the foot, and I am passing with the foot and again it's on the curved part of the neckline, and I already did the stay stitching, and you don't need to back stitch beginning and end. It is a strong enough stitch. Okay, so I stay stitched the neck in preparation to attaching the collars to the neckline. So I have the this is the inside of the garment. I'll flip it to the outside of the garment, and I have my collars. The straight edge coincides with the center back seam, which is half an inch away from the edge. Notice that there is a notch in the middle of this small curve, and that goes to where the shoulder is. Okay, so I am attaching or pinning the collar to the bodice, where I'm matching the shoulder notch of the collar to the shoulder seam of the bodice. Okay, and I'm pinning at this point. The collar will end half an inch away from the center back seam edge in the back, and that's the right way. Okay, so I'll pin over here, and then I will pin this one over here. Okay, and from here in, half an inch down from the curved edge, should be attached to the center of the center front seam. So I'll use a ruler to indicate exactly where this point is. So I'll come down from the top and mark. This is my heat erasable marker, so this mark will go away once I attach. I just need to indicate it so I can align it with the half-inch mark. So this point over here needs to be attached at this point, and I will pin my collar in place, and at the same time I'll do the same thing with the other side. I'll bring this point to over here, and then I will pin my collar in place, and then I'll proceed to basically attaching the two seams together, and I'll pin in place also. So I'm stretching them, and then if I will clip after I pin. I'll clip a little bit between my pins. Okay. So I'm aligning my edges and pinning. And I'll do the same thing with this area. Okay, and also I can, there are areas of tension, so what I'm going to do with this area that is creating tension is I am going to release the tension by clipping the seam allowance. Okay, so adjusting because I don't need any puckers in there. I think I can actually clip the seam allowance in between to release any tension that's happening in here. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, so that my neckline stretches while like straightens while I'm attaching both pieces to each other. All right, what I'm going to do right now is kind of a basting stitch, machine basting stitch of the collar to the neckline, because I am going to add facing on top of the neckline once I'm done. So what I'm going to do is I am going to do a machine basting stitch to attach the collar to the neckline of the bodice. So I changed the stitch length to number 4, and I am going to stitch at 1/4 inch just to have them nice and stable, and as if I'm working with both layers as one. Again, it's the machine basting, so you don't need to back stitch. And use your seam guide to sew at 1/4 inch from the edge. And that what I'm doing right now is to prepare it to be able to install the facing on top of the collar. And you're gonna do it on one go, basically. And when you come to the center, make sure that your marks are matching. Remove your pin. And if your seam allowance tend to pleat or something like that, raise your foot and adjust the fabric. Make sure that nothing is underneath that doesn't need to be involved. Okay, so your fabric needs to be flat and just the 2 layers that you're working with. And as you can see, the collar is temporarily held in place with a machine basting stitch. Okay, and the next step, I'm going to show you how to finish this neckline using the facing.